the heck is up, guys? It's Jacob here, and today I'm going to be doing a review of this Aoyue, 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 Aoyue soldering station. Anyways, whatever. You guys get the point. It's Aoyue, Aoyue, right? Aoyue. It's some off-brand Chinese brand, obviously, manufactured in China, and supposedly it's actually like one of the higher class brands or whatever in China. So it is actually like made for Chinese, I think. But I want to do a review on this because I think it's a very unique soldering station. It's actually, I believe, one of the best budget soldering stations you can buy. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at this thing, and I'm going to kind of explain why I think this is actually a really good buy for the money. Alright guys, so this is the whole thing. It's not really an unboxing or anything. Another thing, I just want to make a disclaimer. This isn't like a sponsored video or anything. You know, they didn't sponsor me, this station. They didn't pay me to make this video or anything. These are my actual opinions and thoughts on this station. So this is like a legit video. And trust me when I say I've done a lot of soldering in my day. So, I mean, I have quite a bit of experience. I've worked with all of the brands you can think of, Heiko, Weller, anything like that. So, I'm not gonna really do a comparison in this video, but what I want to do is I just kind of want to explain what you're really getting for your money and why I think this station itself is very unique. So taking a closer look at it, it is the Aoyue. I'm gonna say Aoyue from now on. I don't really know the actual proper way to pronounce that, and the model is INT936. They have a lot of different soldering stations. I recommend you check them out. I got this guy on eBay. I'm going to tell you the price. I got this thing for like 50 bucks, okay? So it's a very cheap soldering station, considerably cheaper than a lot of other like professional soldering stations, and I would consider this a very like bottom level professional soldering station. And there's a lot of good things I like about this station, and I'll tell you that in the next few minutes. But so this is the base. Anyways, I think this thing is like a 30-watt iron or something. I really should have looked that up before I did this review, but I want to say it's a 30-watt iron. I'll put the actual power rating right there, but I think it's like a 30-watt iron, 40-watt iron or something like that. Anyways, it's just like your typical you know, electronic soldering iron. But what I really like about this thing is, especially when you're looking at cheaper soldering irons, it's a really good price. The quality isn't like mind-blowing, I'll say that to start with, but it has a lot of good features that you find in a lot higher end soldering stations. So to take a look at it, they make this model, this particular model, also in a digital version, and I don't like the digital version as much. I've had the digital version. It has an actual LCD and it shows you the temperature. The reason I don't like the digital version is because it uses actual buttons to change the temperature. Like I've had a Weller WESD51 station that had that same kind of digital configuration, but it uses potentiometer. I like the potentiometer because it keeps that same temperature that I left it at. Their digital version of this, I kind of have to say it sucks because it's actually more expensive, but you have to use the buttons to flip through the temperature. It takes forever. And another thing is the buttons wear out over time and eventually they fail. So I definitely recommend this. It has a good feeling potentiometer on here. It doesn't feel incredibly cheap like my cheap Chinese power supply, but it actually feels pretty solid. It has a good feel to it, and it hasn't worn out on me or anything. It doesn't go glitchy or anything like that. So it's been a really solid base station here, and I've never had one of these fail. Even my digital one didn't fail, but I ended up giving that to someone else. But I've never had the actual base station fail, so it's pretty good. It's pretty solid build. I mean, it's not anything, like I said, amazing, but it'll do for the job. I definitely would not recommend this station if you're like soldering like 25 hours a day and that's like your actual like profession. But it's a really good station if you just use it every once in a while, or if you're not like a professional solderer and you don't use it all the time. It's really good for a lot of electronics work all across the board, really just depending on whatever you do, but it's a great station. So anyways, let's look at this thing. So here's the actual knob, as you guys can see. Nothing fancy here, but what is really nice about it, and you'll notice, is it actually has temperatures on here. Okay, I see a lot of cheap soldering stations that are really there. For one, they say they're temperature controlled, but if you notice, they don't have real temperatures printed on there. It kind of says like low, then it kind of gets higher, or sometimes they have that, you know, like band that gets from thin to thicker to kind of indicate that it's getting to a higher temperature. and they're not true temperature controlled soldering irons. They're more like 120 volt irons, just like a regular soldering iron, going through a lamp dimmer that's disguised as a base station with a weight in there. They're not real soldering stations. They're not actual variable temperature soldering stations. What's nice about this is it actually, inside here, it has a ceramic heating element with an actual temperature sensor, and it gives temperature feedback. So this is like true temperature control, which is very hard to find on very cheap soldering stations. So this actually has a transformer in here, and it runs at 24 volts. I think it's an AC output. I want to say it runs at 24 volts AC, and it actually has like real temperature controlled feedback. Another thing that's really nice, so here I'll show you guys this real quick. These are the actual heating elements that it runs inside there. So it's a ceramic heating element. This is a replacement element, and it has 4 leads on it. So it has 2 for the actual heater and then 2 for the temperature sensor. So it does have real temperature feedback. It's not like open loop controls or anything like you might find on some really cheap stations. So yeah, I mean, the base is, I'm just going to keep going over the base real quick. It has an IEC connector, which I really like this, okay? Some of my other irons, I even had a Heiko. I had a Heiko, and I had a Weller that they just don't have this IEC. They have like a cable that comes out of the back of it. And I kind of like this IEC because it makes it really nice and portable for me to just take places. It's really easy. One thing I don't like about this, so these are the 2 lights. One of them I think is like a fault, and one of them is when it's actually heating up. But one thing I kind of don't like is this connector. I mean, it's all right. It's kind of like one of those off-the-shelf solutions. I think they do that to save money or whatever. But oftentimes when I'm plugging it in, this little screw here is like, it's really hard to get it threaded on there just right. You have to play around with it a lot to actually screw it on. So I mean, it works, and a lot of times this actual clamp isn't the right size for the wire, so the wire is like really easy to pull out of there, or at least the shielding is, so it doesn't clamp on the actual shielding very well. But besides that, I mean, it's all right. I mean, I don't find myself disconnecting it a lot anyways, but I'm just saying this connector isn't the best. Like, I've had my Heiko where you just plug it in and turn it like 90 degrees clockwise and it just locks. I like that a lot better, but you know, it's just one of those small little things you get, you know, when you pay a lot less money. But I mean, overall, it's a good connector. So there's 5 pins. I don't know exactly what they are, but they show the actual pin diagram in the manual. And I think 2 of them are for the actual AC voltage for the heating element, 2 of them are for the sensors, and 1 is a ground. So this iron is actually grounded like a lot of professional soldering irons. The actual iron goes to the earth's ground through the IEC connector and into the actual socket. So it is a grounded iron. Alright guys, before I show you the actual iron, I thought I'd show you these 2 pieces because they're just really quick to show you. Here's the actual like base station, and it's actually a pretty solid quality, I'd say. It's better than I get with a lot of like higher end stations. Sometimes you get these like wonky little like spring things and they work, but this thing is actually a pretty solid base. It has a good foundation. You can screw it in, I think. I don't know if you can. No, it doesn't look like you can. But it's a pretty good little base station. This part's a little like flaky. It's kind of like, I don't know, that part's a little wonky, but the actual base station's pretty solid. The actual solder holder, I'm not a huge fan of this thing anyways. I usually take my solder off here, but I mean, it is what it is. It's just a cheap little, you know, addition. I don't really like this thing anyways, but I mean, it works. I don't know. It's pretty solid. I was gonna say if you tug on it, it might want to fall over. If your solder roll isn't very heavy and you don't have a lot of solder on here, it'd probably fall right off the roll, or this thing would tip over. But because I have a rather large roll on here right now, it holds pretty well. But I don't know how that would work if your roll was running out. It'd probably fall right over. There's no place to like actually screw it in or anything. But I mean, it is what it is. Alright guys, so here is the actual iron. So now this is what I want to talk about. And one of the things I really, really like about this station is it's very, very easy and cheap to get replacement parts for. Okay, there's a lot of Chinese brands out there with like, you know, there's so many different Chinese brands out there, it's not even funny. And they're all like kind of incompatible. They're not really like true brand names. This is like an actual legit Chinese brand name, I can say that. They've been around for quite a while, as many years as I can remember. I mean, I bought this iron. This is one of the first irons I ever bought, and they're still around today. You can buy parts for them. You can buy the actual irons themselves. And what I really like is they sell like individual parts. Like you can buy the heating element replacement for it. I've had Weller irons where I can't buy the damn heating element for it. If the iron goes out or something goes wacky in this, you're screwed. You got to buy the whole wand over, and they're not very cheap. The replacement parts for these are readily available, and they've been around, they've been established for quite some time, so it's easy to get replacement parts for these. You can get all kinds of tips. They have many different types of tips. You can also get like off-brand Chinese tips, but you can get those for any iron, whether it's a Heiko or a Weller or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? You can get cheap Chinese tip replacements for anything, but they sell really nice tips. They have pretty high quality tips, but you can also buy off-brand ones too. But it's really easy to get replacement parts for these. And like I said, I've never had a base station go out. I have had one of the cables kind of go shorty, and you know, where it shorts out, or like there's a break inside of it before, and in that case I just bought a whole new wand. But you can get a whole wand for like 20 bucks, so they're not too expensive. But what's really nice is if your heater goes out or something like that, you can just replace the element. And this thing costs, it comes with a replacement element, and you can buy one of these for like 5 or 6 bucks, and they're not really hard to replace. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to replace the actual heating element. So the quality of the wand is pretty solid, I gotta say. I mean, it's up there. It feels really good. It's very light. It's very easy to work with. The cable is like one of those like silicone cables. It's like extremely flexible. So it doesn't have like a solid feel. It's not like I'm always trying to tug on the cable. It has a very good feel to the actual wand itself. Like I said, this connector, I don't know about this thing. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not a huge fan of this thing, but it works. So the cable, like I said, very nice quality. It is burn proof. You can turn the thing on. You can have the thing on full temperature. It's not going to burn through it. So just like you would expect out of a high quality iron, it's got that silicone cable it's not going to burn through it. The actual iron itself, I mean, it's not made of the best quality materials, but it gets the job done. And like I said, it's very light, and it feels really good in the hand. I mean, I've soldered with this thing for hours straight, and it doesn't, you know, it never gets like hard to handle or anything. So let me show you guys how you take this thing apart. Very easy to disassemble this iron. I'll go ahead and take it apart. Here's one of the things you got to watch out for when you're actually disassembling the iron and replacing the tip. You'll notice when I take the tip off, right under there is the actual ceramic heating element, and this guy right here is very, very fragile. I've had a lot of other irons, and most professional irons I've worked with do not have this element exposed. There is like an actual metal barrel around this, and then your tip slides into it. This is a very fragile element, and it will crack very easy. So that's one thing you got to be careful of when you're replacing these tips, is it will crack right there at that spot or down here. And once you crack it, you got to replace it. What I like about it is it's very easy to replace if you need to. You can unscrew this part right here, and it exposes it a little bit more, and right there is the actual, just a little PCB where it's all soldered into. So the heating element itself is very easy to replace. It just takes a few minutes. Obviously you're going to need another soldering iron, so you should have something else laying around. This shouldn't be your only iron, but and then also, if you do have, even if you have like a Heiko or something like that laying around, like a really high quality iron, this is a really good cheap backup. Again, for the 50 bucks, you cannot go wrong. I mean, it's a really good price for this iron. So if you do buy a replacement wand, I recommend buying an actual Aoyue branded wand. There are Chinese copies of the Chinese iron. I'm not even kidding. Like, there are irons that sell for like 5 bucks, like this actual wand for like 5 bucks, and they don't have the right cable. It's like very hard cable. The wand is very cheap quality, and it just won't last you more than a week. So definitely make sure. I mean, the actual brand Aoyue, they make pretty good quality stuff. I mean, I'm not saying it's like, you know, industry leading or anything, but it's really good for like entry level hobbyists or anything, or if you're on a budget or whatever. It's a very, very good iron. Good little like temperature controlled soldering station. So let's see if I can get this damn thing back on here. So anyways, it's pretty simple construction. There it is. The actual cable relief on this, I mean, I'm not too sure about this. It's kind of hard. It works. I mean, I don't know. I don't put a lot of stress on it, so I don't know how it would last if you put a lot of stress on this. It probably wouldn't. I don't know. It seems pretty solid, but I don't know. I just feel like it would crack. This little sleeve that goes around the ceramic element, then the tip slides over there. Like I said, they make all kinds of tips. Like any tip you can think of, they probably have it. So, and then this actual little like metal barrel, and then this guy. And so, like I said, one of the biggest things I really like about this iron, first off, it's got real temperature control. So it's not like those fake like little like light dimmered with like 120 volt irons, like line level irons or anything like that. It's a proper low voltage, temperature controlled soldering iron. The iron feels pretty good. Mostly, I like that you can buy replacement parts for anything in this whole iron. Like, you can buy every piece on this iron individually, and so no matter what's broken on your iron, really, you can buy a whole new wand if you wanted to, if you want to have like a spare wand laying around. But you can also buy individual replacement parts, including the heating element, which I find is what goes out most often on soldering irons. So for like someone just getting started, or like I said, even as like a backup iron, this thing is an incredible, like, significant step up from something like one of these just little like line level soldering irons. It's way different than that. And like I said, I don't know how many times I've said this, but it has real temperature control. A lot of people don't realize that. If you're going to go buy a cheap soldering station, make sure it has actual temperature feedback and not like one of those like open loop jobbies. They suck, okay? They're just as bad as a line level. You might as well hook one of these things up to a light dimmer and call it temperature control. That's pretty much what they're doing. So it is a really good station for the money. It's solid, and it's held up for me over many years. So I haven't had any issues with this thing, and I would say it's definitely well worth the money. One thing I will say, I mean, you're not gonna like weld together the crack in the Titanic with this thing. It doesn't have a ton of power. I mean, but it's just like any other electronic soldering iron. If you're going to be soldering like majorly big joints with this thing, and you're going to be doing like huge power stuff with it, it's not going to work, okay? It's just going to suck all the heat out of this thing. And like I said, it's like a 30 or 40 watt iron or whatever. So, I mean, it works really good with like, it does good up to like 12 gauge wire. If you're going to start doing stuff bigger than that, this is just it's not going to heat up fast enough. It's not going to have enough power. Nothing wrong with this iron in particular, but it's just using the wrong tool for the wrong job, right? If you're going to be doing, large gauge wires or anything like that, huge copper buses or anything, you need a lot larger iron. You need like 100 watt, 120 watt iron or something like that. So this is just the wrong tool for the job. It does really good for what it's made for. It's made for like electronics, So overall, I'd say this thing's definitely worth a purchase. If you're looking for just a cheap budget iron, definitely go with this brand. They are well established, I would say, as far as like kind of the cheaper brand goes. And I wouldn't go as far as to say they're cheap. Like I said, this thing's held up very well for me. I've never had a base station fail. I do not like their digital one. It is kind of hokey. I hate how it resets every time you turn the damn thing on. You have to literally punch in the temperature. It's not like it has like a keypad. It has like an up and down arrow, and you have to sit there and screw around with it. I don't like that. I really would just say stick with the analog version of it. Get the little potentiometer one. It works pretty damn well. Let me show you guys this thing actually heating up. Alright guys, so let's see how long it takes to heat up. I mean, I wouldn't say it's significantly longer than a lot of other brands of soldering irons I've worked with, so it does heat up rather fast. So I'm going to crank this thing up. Let's put it up to a good temperature. Not that it's going to make it heat up any faster, but we'll kick it up and let's see how long it actually takes. So there it goes. Oh, so I guess one of those LEDs, then one of them's not a fault. I guess one of them's just a power indicator, and one of them's showing that it's actually heating up. So you can see I have it set to a tad over 350. Doesn't need to be that hot. We'll just set it to like 350 Celsius. So there's the actual, I think the top one is the heating indicator. So when it turns off, that means it's reached the temperature, and it'll just use some closed loop temperature control to maintain that temperature. So let's see if it's actually good to go yet. Almost there. There it is. So it's already good to go. Yeah, so I mean it's not that long. It's way faster than one of those little like line level soldering irons. So there it is. So the top one's the power, the bottom one is the actual heating. So when it's on, it's heating, and when it's off, it's not heating. So obviously when you're soldering a lot of stuff, you can tell this light will be like solid. Okay, so if you're soldering like big joints, it'll be solid. If you're doing a lot of small work, I mean, it does very well on small work. If you're just doing like through hole components and stuff like that, it has no problem doing that. But if you're doing like large PCB traces, this iron can it can have a hard time keeping up with that. You might have to crank the temperature way up and try and get like a lot of energy built up in the iron, and then like try and even get like a lot of solder on there to like get even more energy and a lot of surface area when you contact that actual trace, and just hope for the best, because really it's not an incredibly powerful iron. And like I said, it's just you're just not using the right tool for the job. So it does very well for what it's made for. Another thing I will say about this isn't just in this iron in particular, but any professional soldering iron, just for you noobs, if you guys are coming from something like this to something like this, very important that you understand This guy here is grounded, okay? It's actually it's tied back through the station to the actual mains Earth terminal, to anything that's grounded. So don't work on anything live, and just keep in mind that this thing's kind of like an oscilloscope ground lead, you know? You always got to be, you always got to keep in mind that this thing is tied to ground. So if you're soldering something, even if you're soldering something that's not really on, if you're soldering like capacitor banks or something like that, or something that's tied to capacitor banks, and it has a loop through ground, this thing will turn into an arc welder. So just be careful and make sure that you keep in mind that the tip of this iron is actually tied to the earth through the ground. That's a good thing. It is a good thing. It's something that you want. It prevents like static electricity and stuff from building up, but it will create ground loops, and it can create very big problems if you're not careful and you don't keep in mind that the tip of this iron is grounded. Again, that's nothing against this iron in particular. A lot of professional irons are grounded in that fashion, but just keep that in mind. I gotta like scoot down to get in the frame. Alright guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. That pretty much wraps it up for this review. If you guys liked it, definitely give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. I hope to see you guys in the next one, and as always, have a good one.